But he was very forthcoming, quite ordinary. Like he's off for no, just that wasn't the cars halfway through. Yeah, we went to give pretty much led the thing that happened was like I thought it could be more than people that were driving out. He wasn't introduced by the guy, we gave him the evaluation and all that, and then it's always yeah, hello, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. No, we don't hear you talk. We don't hear Yeah. Apparently. Like, we get the stories in the
Without that.
Okay, we're ready to go. Right, ladies and gentlemen, and I all welcome you here to this Irish Writers Centre event, which is being held in association with the Listowel Writers Week and with the support of our Minister for the Diaspora, Jimmy Deenahan. My name is Liz McManus. I'm chair of the board, and I have to say it's a privilege to be in that position and to work with Barry Bastani, our director, and her very able team. You've probably met some of them tonight. And we host a lot of events here, but I have to say this is one special event. We're really pleased that we have such a distinguished writer as Dennis Lehane here tonight. Unfortunately, his voice is a bit affected by all the talking he's been doing today and interviewing, but it's a really great honour. And it's also, I think, in line with our policy of building international links as a national writers' centre. We have a couple of distinguished guests here, and I won't name them all, but I would like to just acknowledge the presence here of the Norwegian ambassador, Mr. Ness, and his wife. You're both very welcome indeed. And I want to welcome the American ambassador here, Kevin O'Malley. I think it's his first time at the centre. He's been here less than a year, but he's already making a mark. I'm sure you can gather from the name that his grandparents came from Mayo, but you probably don't know that he is also a published author, In fact, he told me just before coming in that he's actually published 9 books, none of which will be made into films or win the Pulitzer Prize. They're legal books. In fact, the one that when I Googled him I came up with was a book on jury instruction, which apparently is used, thought of very highly in the federal court system across the US. So we're delighted that the ambassador is here to introduce our distinguished guest, our distinguished writer, for the interview. But just before I ask the ambassador to take over, a word about emergency. If there is such a thing as an emergency, please exit down the stairs that you came up. If by any chance there's a blockage there, our staff will show you, everybody laughs at this, but it's deadly serious, out the window. And there is a fire escape at the window there for anybody, for us all to escape if there is such need. So please just enjoy yourselves tonight. It's a wonderful occasion for us, and I know it is for you too. So, Ambassador, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I am a frustrated writer. I've published 9 books, and I would love to get one of them thrown into a movie and then retire on my laurels and a big bankroll. I've written on very technical legal subjects until President Obama asked me to come here 8 months ago. I was what you would call a barrister and prosecuted mafia cases across the United States. But this is a much more peaceful job as the United States Ambassador to Ireland, and it's a great pleasure to be here to recognize an American author following in the footsteps of so many great Irish American writers. We have, from where I sit in the United States, from where I sat in the United States, it was sometimes hard for me to determine where Irish culture, and particularly Irish writing, ended and where Irish American writing began. There were so many Irish American authors who took so much from Joyce and Yeats and went on to a great success in our country. And Dennis is really one of those success stories. By coming here tonight, I get a chance to do one short commercial. And that commercial is for a program we at the embassy called Creative Minds. And it is something that I started and I'm very passionate about. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that this wonderful relationship between the United States and Ireland, and it is a wonderful relationship. It's steeped in family. It's steeped in shared bloodlines. It's steeped in a culture that's intertwined because so many Irish came to the United States and made my country what it is. People like me who were great beneficiaries of Irish emigration. When my grandparents left, when they left Mayo with 7 children, no money, no job, no education, came to the US, had another 8 children. My dad was the firstborn in the U.S. And in 2 generations, I get to come back as the ambassador. We have a special place in our hearts in the U.S. for Ireland. And I just don't want to see anything happen to that relationship as Ireland becomes so much more globally focused than it was in the past. As immigration changes, your immigration pattern where you're accepting immigrants now and you're not exporting O'Malley's anymore to the U.S. and where we have so many immigrants that we are accepting into the U.S. That will be just fine citizens, but it'll change how we look at the world. It'll change how the U.S. is looking at the world, and it'll change how Ireland is looking at the world. So we're trying to pull American authors, American musicians into Ireland to work with young Irish writers and musicians. For example, we've had David Chase, who was the creator of The Sopranos. He did some master classes around Dublin here for us, and did a program much like this at the Ambassador's Residence. And we've had singer-songwriters like Ben Folds come over and played at various pubs around town, and then also put on a performance at my residence. We're trying to blend the young Irish and the young Americans together, so that this relationship, which is so good and has resulted in such a huge economic machine going on right now, with shared prosperity and real jobs and real profits for people. We're trying to keep that going. So the Dennis is here tonight to continue on in that great tradition is wonderful. That you're all here is great, and so I think it's probably time to talk to our guest of honor, who's having a little bit of trouble with his voice, but hopefully we'll all be able to hear him. He's got a lot to say. A man of great talent who's written so many books that you've probably read. He's done, some people would say he was responsible for the best television program ever written and ever presented in the US, called The Wire. I learned a lot of new words by watching The Wire. I was telling him before, we had to put captions on and watch it that way, even though it was hard to follow all of it. You didn't want to miss any of the dialogue, and his writing is just so sharp and so true. So Dennis, they came here to hear you, not me.
Last time I talked to you about 4 years ago, you were here for Moonlight Mile. You signed up. You said that sounds like my voice is getting sympathy. That you were writing a gangster novel and you were having a ball. That was Live by Night. You've just written the sequel, World Gone By, charting the adventures of Joe Cotton's rise and triumph, and I won't give away what happens to him. Was it fun, and what drew you to? Why did you want to write a gangster?
Sorry, one second. Yeah, one second.
He sounds like a gangster man.
I wanted to write a gangster novel just because I grew up in love with the genre. It's my favorite sort of subgenre, and to me, it's always been a great metaphor for unfettered capitalism. The difference is it's alive even in here. Just because he does his dirt with a pen and I do mine with a gun doesn't make necessarily a big difference.
That's right.
And it doesn't mean that the gangster is better. He's not. The gangster's not a hero. This book very much is saying the gangster's anything but a hero. But what it's saying is that in comparison, I'm fascinated by society's imprimatur. Why is it okay for all the people who wrecked the global economy in 2008 to show up at cocktail parties? Why is that okay? And they do. They should all be in jail, every single one of them, and they're not. But yet, if you said that guy's a drug dealer, you'd be like, oh, I don't want to talk to him. My thing is I'd rather probably talk to the drug dealer at the end of the day. It doesn't make it better, but it doesn't make it worse. And so that's the appeal of the gangster book. So, and plus really cool clothes, cool cars. Everybody smoked, didn't know it was bad for them. So that was a lot of the appeal.
And you've been in love since Jimmy Cagney.
Jimmy Cagney when I was 8, and my uncle Dennis, he loved Jimmy Cagney movies, and they used to go on every Saturday in Boston. And so he used to watch the Jimmy Cagney double feature. When we went over to his house, I used to sit with him and watch him. I fell in love with, cool cars, cool hats, Tommy Adams, people like him really fast.
Sure. Insofar as a book is creating a set of problems and then solving them for yourself,
Yeah.
what were even the problems before that, the problems with the potential problems in writing a gangster novel, that you thought, well, I'm not going to fall into that trap. I'm not going to use that particular cliche.
Yeah, it was. Part of it is the East Coast or the Midwest. You think, what do you think when you think of Jimmy Cagney movies? What do you think of Prohibition? You think of whiskey. You think of Once Upon a Time in America, Boardwalk Empire. I said, well, everybody's done whiskey. I can't do whiskey. I'll do rum. And it happened that I knew where most of the rum came in. It was a little part of Tampa called Ybor City, which is, it reminds me a lot of the movie Casablanca.
Okay.
Not the real Casablanca, just this myth of Casablanca. And in the 1920s, it was filled with Cubans, African Americans, Spaniards, and Italians. And they all worked in the cigar industry. And some of them were revolutionaries, some of them were union organizers, and others were rummers. And I just thought that must have been one really sexy time. And so that's what Live by Night was, his journey to Ybor City and ultimately to Atlanta. And then this became, let's pick him up 10 years later. He's older, he's more well.
He's haunted.
He's haunted.
Yeah.
He's haunted. He sees a ghost in the first, I think, 4 pages.
Yeah.
And the ghost is trying to get him a message. And when ghosts are trying to get you a message, things are probably not good.
It's a book of portents and it's doom-laden.
Yes.
There's so much foreshadowing. It works perfectly well as a thriller, of course, but there's I thought of Jason Burke certainly because of the territory and things like. Talk about the trip to see King Lucius.
Oh, Joe, here's a rumor which makes no sense. Joe is he's very much a fixer for the mob. He has stepped out of the day-to-day business, and he is the bridge between mob and high society in Tampa. And when we meet him, he's a rock star. He's got everything going for him. And he's charismatic, he's good looking, he's smart, he's slick. Nothing can go wrong. And that's right when he gets the word that somebody might be trying to kill him, which makes no sense. So he begins to investigate the rumor, and it becomes a journey, like on what used to be called a picaresque, a journey across the sort of West Central Florida in 1943. And we meet a host of characters, all of whom have their own little stories. And one of them is a guy named King Lucius, who is the phosphate king of Florida. He rides up and down the Peace River on his personal houseboat. And he's surrounded by 24 guards he calls the Androphagi. The Androphagi in Greek legend were cannibals. And Joe has to go onto his boat and find out if he's behind the plot, knowing that a lot of people step on that boat, don't step back off. And that's one of the scenes in the middle of it.
And because we know no one has any logical reason to kill Joe, that is just a most terrifying episode. And I mean, the kind of strange, almost Boschian description of the boat itself.
Yeah.
It's chilling. It's chilling.
Well, thank you.
And the canvas then in Live by Night is it's like an alternative political and social history in those books, and they both maybe have their beginnings in The Given Day, which is your magnum opus.
Yes.
It's very long, Dennis, isn't it?
Very long.
Yeah. No, but you've been writing with one exception, a couple of exceptions, for about 12 years in the first half of the 20th century.
Yeah.
What led you to that? What made you think, in the first instance, The Given Day, and then taking it further?
It actually started with Shutter Island, which is in the 1950s.
Of course, yeah.
I don't know, like a lot of people, I was very upset with the way my country was headed. I was very angry about the Patriot Act. I was very angry that we were going to do what Ben Franklin warned about, which was sell our liberty, a little bit of security. And I didn't know, I was honest, I didn't know what country I was living in. And so I couldn't write about it without writing a polemic. That's not my job. My job is not to infuse you with my politics. My job is to write entertainments that hopefully last, as I see it. So I said the only way I can comment on the present now is to write about it from the past. So I picked 1954, which is arguably the most repressive year in American history, to write about a guy whose brain is collapsing from a type of self-repression. And then I moved into The Given Day because I started to see, I was the proud son of a union guy, and I started to see that the political climate was turning against the unions in the United States. Everybody says the same thing. They say, well, unions were great once. Now that we have the weekend, now that we have health benefits, now that we don't have to work 70-hour weeks, now that our kids don't have to work, thanks, now go away. So I said I want to write about unions, but I need to pick an event that even I don't know how I feel about, because if you write a polemic, again, it's boring. So I said, do I believe that emergency personnel should be allowed to strike? And the answer is no, no. And so I said, I'm going to write about the Los Angeles strike, where they walked off the job. The city went crazy. I mean, it went crazy. And I want to tell it from all perspectives. And it ended up becoming a book about America in 1 year of its life. Joe showed up in the middle of that book as a little boy, and I said, about midway through the book, I went, there's my gangster. I've been waiting for you 20 years. He was a little boy. He was born into a house of police royalty. He was born into a sort of a Victorian, the vast vestiges of a kind of a two-toilet Irish, lace-curtain Irish bourgeois household. And he was born into a loveless marriage. And so I said, this guy would hate hypocrisy. He would have no respect for any of the finery of the world. He's your guy. He's emotionally cut off from himself. He's a mess. He's perfect. My gangster. And he'll be the right age in 1924. And so that was the decision about halfway through The Given Day. I got my gangster. And I began to concentrate a little bit more on Joe in that book, because he's just a little kid in the book. He has no story.
Sure, yeah.
And then that became his part of it. But it wasn't all, it's funny you say it's an alternative history. Like I know, again, it's out of fashion in my country, but I'm a big lover of the book, The People's History of the United States. I think that's, that to me is the history of the United States. It's about the workers, it's about people who built this country and built this country and built that country. And so that was my look at, I was going to look at American history for 20 years through the working class, or the underclass,
It's great to hear writer talking about politics. It's unusual these days.
Well, I don't think it should be in your books. I think if you read my book and go, oh, he's clearly driving an agenda, then I should be Naomi Wolf, I should be Noam Chomsky, I should be writing a manifesto.
It's not about agenda,
right.
It's reflected through. It's kind of in the seam of the work. So
yeah.
It is more than a flavor, it's a very strong flavor.
Well, there's always going to be, I think I write, people once said to me, well, now that you're successful, why don't you write about successful people?
Yeah.
Because I don't give a shit about them. No offense. I don't care about my problems.
Yeah.
What's my worst problem? Oh, the rover got a scratch.
Yeah.
So
your struggle.
My struggle is. So I think a lot of times I'm writing, I'm really writing for my old man. I think a lot.
Yeah.
And he, people say, it's funny, George, I don't know, do any of you know George Pelecanos, the writer, Washington writer? He's a son of immigrants too. We have the exact same attitude. The one thing that makes us just more is being with a group of writers and hearing writers bitch about how tough the job is.
Okay.
We're like, shut up, and try and sell shoes for even a year. Try and say, would you like to see this in a 10.5? And then talk to me about how hard your job is. You make stuff up. People pay you for it. My father worked at Sears and Roebuck. He thought it was the greatest thing in the world. He showed up from here because he couldn't afford to live here. And he showed up, it was the diaspora, diaspora. And he came here to America and they said, we'll give you a job. There'll be a pension. It's secure because you're on a union. And you'll get a watch at the end of 3 years. And oh, by the way, your pay will allow you to buy a house. Father was like, this is great. Where do I sign? But I don't think working at Sears and Roebuck, I would assume the luster came off that job around week 3.
Yeah.
You know? And he went in every day and he did it every day. And I look at that and I just go, that's a bravery, that's a strength, that's a courage that I would never have, ever.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's true, you know, people who build America.
That was my segue to your father and to your parents coming from here and
Yeah.
growing up in a house that, you know, there weren't many books. There wasn't a New Yorker subscription.
No.
This was not your background. When did the seeds of reading and then a little later writing take?
Oh, it was easy. They all got together every weekend. When the family, my father came over as part of the Daisy Chain, and so my mother. So what would happen is the eldest in the family of these massive families would go over, they'd get married, whatever, they could count on somebody they married, and then they'd pull over the next one, and they'd all get in the same area. Immigrants do it to this day, and my neighborhood is now Hmong and Cambodian, and I think it's awesome. It's like, because the Irish lived the American dream, and they got successful, and their kids moved out. So my parents came over, they all moved to Dorchester and Mattapan, and they all would gather on Fridays and Saturdays. They didn't associate with anybody else. We didn't know Americans, you know, we just didn't. And they would gather at each other's houses every Friday and Saturday, and they would tell stories. My brother began to notice after a while that the same stories would come back in a rotation, you know, every 3 months or so. But they had been tweaked. They were different. And they were lying. And instead of anybody else saying, I know, like, I heard you sound that one a couple of weeks ago, and it wasn't a bicycle, it was a horse. And they didn't say that. They went, oh yes. It was crazy. And finally I understood that my first thing I remember understanding is my family has no respect for facts. Facts are transmutable. Facts are the official record, which I think makes sense for people who are told they have to get rid of their language. Facts are something that become postponable. They cared about the truth. They were after an emotional truth. And it was only many years later, like 30 years later, that I realized that what they were doing was they were trying to make sense of the diaspora. Every story was about the old side, every single one. They never told the story about America. It was all about being on the farm. It was all about so-and-so punching a cow. It was, you know, so-and-so went far out of the way. And the point is I think what they were trying to do was stay connected to the homeland because they couldn't reconcile themselves with the fact that they betrayed it by leaving. They couldn't connect to it. So they just kept telling the stories over and over and over again.
When did you begin to feel that they were maybe a little frozen in time, that they'd had
Oh God.
Yeah.
We came back in 75.
Okay.
I was 10. And up until then, all you'd hear is the Irish don't divorce.
Yeah.
They don't have children out of wedlock. They don't this, they don't that. And then we got over here and they were all like wacky. They had like 3 kids out of wedlock. And they weren't officially divorced, but they weren't together.
Yeah.
And we were like, they were like, who told you that? You know, I don't know, it was in the 40s. And I look at my parents and they're like, you know, what happened was they came there and they froze Ireland in time. And they didn't even remotely grasp what was going on over here. And then they would come over and then they would block it. So I came back here in 95 and I was banged around the entire country. I saw all my relatives, and there's hundreds of them. I was here for 5 weeks. And I kept going through this embarrassing situation where I'd say, meet a relative, and I'd say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about Patrick. You know, so he had a heart attack. And they'd say, no, he shot himself. Okay. Then I'd be someplace else. And I'd say, oh, I was so sorry to hear about Kevin. And I'd say, you know, he drowned. You know, they'd say, no, he stepped in front of a train.
Yeah.
You know, so I go back to my old man and I say, Dad, there's like 4 major suicides in our family. Well, why didn't you, all males, all my bloodline, why didn't you tell me that? And he said, but who wants to tell stories like that? So,
Whatever you say nothing.
yeah, it is. But I have a line in The Given Day. It's my proudest moment, really as a writer. I truly believe this. There's a line in The Given Day that in all Irish families, there's a list of things you cannot talk about. The only problem is the list is on the list.
No one has the same list.
You know, and it's like, dude, I remember looks sometimes and just being like, did I just venture out into the minefield? And you know, you just see it. You didn't know this, but you should have known it. We don't discuss the elephant. We leave him in the middle of the room. You know, we walk around.
Your older brother was an actor, an actor.
Yes. Yeah.
Was that something for you? Because the theatre, you wrote a play, and eventually we'll get to the adventures in TV and screenland, but
I think my brother and I had an agreement. He's a really good writer.
Yeah.
He's an amazing writer. And I've acted. And I think we had an agreement when he decided to become an actor. And right around the time I was thinking about becoming a writer, that we would stay out of each other's backyard. That was the deal. We never said it. We never discussed it. But suddenly I was like, well, I won't act anymore.
Yeah.
And he could, I think if he decided to be a writer, he would have crushed me. He had more natural talent for it than I did.
you had a good relationship.
We had a great relationship.
I asked because in the play, in which Dennis Dennis writes a part for his brother, this incredibly nasty father figure,
Yeah,
who his son beats to death with a shovel.
yeah, like you do.
Yeah. Just putting it out there. That's some issues with fathers and brothers.
You know what's really weird? Me and my old man were really close. We were close the way that fathers of his generation were close with his sons.
Yeah.
Not, there wasn't no group hug. It wasn't, how are you feeling, son? But yeah, I felt safe with him. I felt he tried to understand me. He tried to get it. He didn't know what the hell I was talking about most times.
Yeah.
But he tried. He didn't read any of my books. Slept through all my movies. But his argument was, well, your brother works in prison, you don't see you go there. He never did watch any of the other kids do their work. So why should he watch me do mine? But we had a good relationship. And there was a moment, I still remember this, where we were at the store, he was in the back, and he'd lie to everybody. He'd be like, oh, that Mystic River, that was my favorite. That's a good one. He'd be like, you never read it. And so he's in the back, and somebody says, from the audience, well, it's clear you had a very abusive relationship with your father. And I was like, I don't know. This is what I mind, I think, when I mind. The father and son dilemma is simply this. You will never be your father. It's impossible. And yet it is any son's initial ambition. You want to be your old man. And at some point, you deviate from that, but your inner child never does. And so it's this irreconcilable dilemma that I want to be my dad. And so it causes a tense relationship. And so when I first became successful, my father was really watching me. I mean, it was a big day. He was just like, you're not putting on airs now. They say the Irish won't give you anything but success. And so he was very, I remember the way it came out was he hated the way I treated my dog. Because I made my dog like a yuppie. So my dog was my starter child. And my father was like, it's a dog. It sleeps in the where? Is that dog on the couch? And I'd be like, yeah, Dad, it's part of the family. It's not part of the family, it's a dog. So that was interesting how that came out. And he thought that was me losing my way.
Sure. You spoke about the urban novel, kind of, and then finding your way to crime fiction. Could you speak a little bit about that? And just that time when you were a glimmer that maybe you could write, and that finding the kind of book that you wanted to, or thought you could write.
Yeah, it was, I read Richard Price's The Wanderers when I was 14. And it changed my life. It made me go, oh my God, I can write about these. I recognize everybody in this book. I know these people, even though it's set in the 1960s in the Bronx. and it was 1980 in Boston. I was like, I know every single person in this book, which means that I can be a writer. It's a free moment. It's a wonderful moment. Price said he had the exact same moment reading the last 6 of Brooklyn. So, and then from there, I moved into, I discovered Wayne Kennedy, who writes about the Irish Americans in Albany. And I discovered Pete Dexter, who writes about Philly. And suddenly it was, this is what I want to do. I want to write urban novels. I want to write about cities. And I went off to college, and I went off to then graduate school. I was a very esoteric, avant-garde short story writer. And one day I just, as a fluke, said I wanted to write a crime novel. And I did it in 3 weeks. And I thought, that's natural.
Did you know what you were doing?
No, by the end I finished it, and I went, this is what I try to say this to students sometimes. You may think you're a poet and discover you're a short story writer.
Sure.
You may think you're a novelist and discover you're a nonfiction writer. It's almost like the last thing you need to discover. I wanted to be a short story writer. I don't know why. I did. I loved short stories. I loved Chekhov, and I loved Carver, and I loved Henry Debussy, I loved Alice Munro, and I wasn't a short story writer.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I wasn't. It was too much work for me. To this day, if you said to me, write a novel, 40-page novel, or write a 20-page short story, I take the novel in a second. The short story's gonna be like pulling blood out of my eyes. It's gonna be so hard. So suddenly I understood I was natural at novels. It's still to this day, it's the way I think. My ideas come to me as novels.
Was that during before the war?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I blasted it out, and it was awful. It was so bad. But it was written in 3 weeks, and the structure was sound. And then I went back in and rewrote a bunch.
Yeah.
And then I went off to grad school, and then when I was in grad school, I started writing documents in my hand. And I sold them right before the war, the day I was finishing grad school.
Huh.
And then I stepped into the greatest piece of luck in my life. A lot of my career has been luck. It suddenly became insanely cool in 1994 to be Irish American. It was the year of the Irish American. It was friggin' Riverdance,
Yeah.
Mike Flatley, and David Caruso on NYPD Blue, and World Cup. It was just like everybody was wearing green. And that's when I published a private eye novel with an extremely Irish American detective in Boston, most Irish American city. And it began this building of a career.
Did you? Because I know you were influenced by what you call the Jameses, James
Yeah.
A. Burke,
James
James
R.
and
James Conner. And Alan Leonard, huge Alan Leonard.
yeah. But other than that, up until then, because then it exploded, but up until then, it had been quiet. Nonfiction had been,
Yeah.
I mean, Robert Parker was very tired and.
Well, what happened was there was a confluence of things going on. Crime fiction had kind of played itself out, except for James Lee Burke and James R. I'm not saying everybody, but there was a lot of like, really, you wearing a fedora? It's 1989. It's 1992. You know, give me a break. They were just one step above calling women dames.
Yeah.
And it was bad. And then literary fiction, which is its own genre, was we were turning against it. Those of us who had studied it.
Yeah.
And it was what we were turning against was what a writer beautifully described as stories about the vaguely dissatisfied in Connecticut. That's all I read. I said to my buddy at the time, I remember in grad school in '93, I said, if I read one more story in the friggin' New Yorker with two people in a well-appointed Connecticut kitchen complaining about their malaise, I'm gonna jump out a window. And a lot of other writers were coming to that place. So it was, crime fiction doesn't work for me because I don't like its limitations.
Yeah.
But literary fiction has no home for me because I don't want to write about a professor at a Northeastern university having an affair with a student.
While not being able to finish his novel.
Well, not being able to finish the novel. I don't want to write the 256th permutation of Revolutionary Road,
Yeah.
which is a great novel, but I don't want to write it. So
But,
we said, what about fiction without knowing each other? Everybody started to say, I love this phrase from Cormac McCarthy, fiction of mortal event.
Yeah.
What can we do with the crime novel that hasn't been done? Because that seems to be where the social novel went.
Yeah.
And we started doing it, and we started to comment on America as we understood it then, but it was the American that you flew over.
You say we, I know you mean
Mike Connolly,
Laura Lippman, George Pelecanos,
yeah,
in Scotland, Ian Rank, and
Ian Rank and Val McDermott.
yeah.
Who else was doing it at the time? Dan Woodrow started to come out around that time.
It's a kind of wave, and
Yeah, the Scandinavians are kicking our ass now.
Yeah.
We got tired. The Scandinavians are doing it.
you said, and it's interesting because you said you're not particularly. I identify with this. You're not particularly interested in plot, in the plot part of the crime novel.
No,
That in itself.
Yeah. It shows.
It missed. No, you have it gone. It's extraordinary plot, you know. But actually, that's not. I mean, Laura Lippman has said she doesn't read for plot at all in crime fiction. What you're interested in is the other stuff.
Story. A story is not plot.
But the other stuff is not story. The other stuff is plot. Tell me what the other. I mean,
Well, character.
Mortal event.
I like character. I love irreconcilable dilemmas. I love depth of language. But story does matter very much to me.
Sure.
Plot is the vehicle. Story is the journey. I don't care what the vehicle looks like. I really don't. If it has 4 wheels and a drive shaft, it can get us there. That's why I feel my plots are serviceable.
Yeah.
But they begin and they carry you on. Alice was down the rabbit hole at the end of page 1. Stories should start.
Sure.
You know, I agree. I don't want 15 pages of, Home Unlimited grid line, never start a book with weather. I don't need you to set the scene, start the story. Then we'll get to see. So,
but also the world. I mean,
yeah.
you're out of the kitchen. But you're not on the beach. You're on the streets. Or
Yeah.
if it's the beach, it's Miami Beach. It's a beach where something is happening. You know?
Yeah.
So a certain, as you said, social novel, social awareness, observation.
Yeah.
Political flavor.
A little political flavor, but not crazy, not like
Not polemic, but
no,
the world.
yeah.
What Trump said, the way we live now, the world, and the world we live in. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, it's very important to say this is where the political falls out. Somebody said to me about the Given Day, well, that's clearly you're clearly a leftist. And I said, really? The government that I'm attacking in that book was a progressive liberal government. It was the government of Woodrow Wilson. That was about as liberal as you got at the time. So, and they were Democrats. No, I'm not attacking left or right, red or blue.
Yeah.
I'm attacking the idea of it, what institutions do and what governments do when they're scared of losing their power. So, yeah, and I think my first book, The Bad Guys Are All Democratic Politicians. So, no, it's not that. It's not like, oh, look at me holding the flag for my side. It's more, the system is broken. That was what we did with The Wire. The system was broken. Those guys were even more gutsy than me. They went places. I take no responsibility for The Wire. Let me please say that. I was hired to paint a room. They gave me a paintbrush and they said, make it magenta, make it Lehane magenta. And that's what I did. That was David and Ed Burns. That was David Simon and Ed Burns. We just serviced the vision. We were working bees, caught in something wonderful. And they taught me how to write scripts.
Just backtrack a little to the Kenzie Gennaro. After 2, after 3, you're in a series.
Yeah.
You said once, no one ever says about an ongoing crime series, hey, the 17th is my favorite.
Yeah. Never happens.
And I think you've done 5, Don's 5.
No, it's the 4th.
It was the 4th, and then, but Misty River came before.
No, Fresh Rain. And then I went to Misty River.
Okay. Did you think you were done then?
Yeah, I had a feeling it was done.
Yeah.
I just felt like I'd done, with God Maybe Gone, I felt I pushed the genre as far as I could push it for me. Then I did Fresh Rain as a sort of peace offering, because you couldn't end on God Maybe Gone.
Yeah.
Because it's the most depressing ending of any book I've ever written. That's saying something. So I wrote Fresh Rain as sort of
it's a coda.
Yeah, it's a little coda. Give me a happy ending, get on.
Yeah.
And then I did Misty River. And I felt when I was doing Misty River, like I was free. Like I could write third person. I could investigate such a much broader canvas. And that was attractive to me. And I did that for 10 years, and then Patrick knocked on the door again.
Yeah. It's unusual. Once a series is up and running, and it was successful.
It was just becoming successful.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, okay, I'm contrary by nature.
Yeah.
I'm just, probably the truest line I ever wrote about myself is in Live by Night. And it's, you see the best and the worst of people, and the worst and the best of people. And that's absolutely my nature.
Right.
So if you say to me, wow, your series is successful, I'm like, I'm trying to leave the series.
How do I get out of this
Yes.
problem?
So that's how I left the series. And I'm glad I left it. I feel like, again, like, you know, my fear is that somebody's going to be in the stacks someday, and they're going to be looking at the 17th Patrick and they're going to say the first few were so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you kind of know when to get off the stage.
Yeah.
Some people, James Lee Burke, can consistently keep a level of quality in David Robichaud books.
Yeah.
The question isn't whether he can do it. Ian Rankin can do it.
Yeah.
The question is whether I can do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
And you didn't want to.
I just felt like I'm phoning this in.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to start phoning this in.
Are you going back again?
I don't know. Never say never. No.
Yeah, I should.
But
Yeah.
I'm not. I have no plans immediately.
Mystic River was such an extraordinarily powerful book. You felt liberated once that?
Well, I felt liberated, and then I felt like, oh shit. Because nobody saw. I didn't see it. My publisher saw it. When I finished Mystic River, and I felt like this is the book. This is the one I wanted to write. This is the one I've been trying to write for 12 years now. Which is when I first took my first notes on what became Mystic River. And my wife at the time read it. She said, "Wow, this is your best book, but you could call it Everybody Loses." I mean, that's pretty much it. Everybody Loses. And
The American way.
that's
No, it isn't.
And she said, "How are you proud of it?" And I said, "I'm prouder than anything I ever wrote." And she said, "How many copies do you think it would sell? Think it'll sell?" And I was like, 6. You know, 7. I just thought, okay, the Russian-influenced, dark, classic tragedy set in a fictitious neighborhood in Boston, in which everybody loses. When people say to you, did you know it was going to be your hit?
With child abuse.
With child abuse.
And
That's pretty much, you know, I wasn't like sitting there going, yeah, I got that drug out. My publisher believed it, and they said, we're going to make this book a hit. They did. Then, once it was a hit, I was unprepared for it. And I was unprepared that suddenly people were expecting what my next book was going to be. And I panicked pretty good.
Yeah.
For a while, I was paralyzed for about a year.
Right.
And then I said, well, what would they never expect me to do?
Yeah.
A Gothic.
Yes.
I'm going to do a Gothic.
Yeah.
So I wrote Gothic.
There was so much genre angst at that time. I remember a lot of people in the States, in the fanzines and at Bouchercon saying, what is Dennis doing?
Oh,
Why doesn't he go back to his series?
yes.
Because there's a certain amount of fan fanaticism.
It's the moment in Stardust Memories.
Yeah.
Alan runs into a fan and he says, what can I do for you? And she says, tell funnier jokes.
Yeah.
You know, they get used to you doing a certain thing.
Why don't you make films like your early funny ones?
Yeah, and I want you to keep doing the thing that they expect you to do.
Yeah.
And my feeling was, look, I came to this with a very simple maxim. It's from Humphrey Bogart. He said, all you owe the audience is a great performance. Which I love the word great.
Yeah.
Which is, you don't owe the audience what they expect. You don't owe them Mystic River 2. You owe them the best you have.
Yeah.
So never leave anything on the field. Never phone it in. Never just write the book because you got a balloon mortgage payment coming. But I don't owe you what you think. I just owe you the best book I can write. And that's made me now fit in no camp. I'm like the man without a country now. I just float out there. People are like, oh wait, I'm really mystery writer. And you're too violent for literary fiction and nobody can claim you. And every now and then I get bummed out with that. But then a friend of mine said to me once, another writer, he said, who has your career? And I said, nobody. And he said, yeah. And we want it. And I was like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, we do.
That's kind of cool.
Good job.
So, yeah, I like the one doing.
Well, we've been good. We've talked about literature and we've talked about art, so
Yes, we have.
now we can talk about movies.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Clint Cole.
Yes, Clint,
Yeah.
like you do.
Yeah.
Um,
And you didn't want to do the movie.
No, I fired my agent over it, my Hollywood agent. I didn't want to sell it to the movies. I felt like, they're just going to destroy it. It's going to be a bunch of people who don't know how to read.
Yeah.
Turning a movie into just something awful. And Mr. River, again, it wasn't the plot.
Sure.
So it was like, they're going to mess it up. They're just going to screw it up. And then Clint had to jump through a lot of hoops and find my New York literary agent to get to me. And then he called me. And that was surreal. Now, here's what happens. The phone rings from Hollywood. You see 310 area code. It means that you're going to answer the phone, you're going to say hello, and they're going to say, hold please for so-and-so. It's like the beginning of their general dickiness. That you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Something's too important to make his own phone.
All the time, right? It becomes a running gag. And so even if your cell phone, it's their cell phone, you've worked with this producer, it's their cell phone number, and you pick it up. Hold please, friend. And now after time we get back to you go, actually, I'm so sorry, Alan's in conference. Can you return? There you go. I answer the phone, it's 310 area code, and I hear, hey, it's Clint. I'm like, hi, Clint. And Clint did this thing, every single person on Mr. River pretty much in this story. I said to Clint, I said, look, I'm very flattered, I'm a big fan of your movies. Perfect World is one of my all-time favorite films. Love Unforgiven, grew up on you. But I don't want to sell this to the movies. And he said, I know, I understand. And I'm not going to force you to do something you don't want to do. But if you did, and then pick my brain for like an hour, and then he'd hang up, and then call me the next day. It was like we were dating. And finally he said the magic words. He said, look, if this puts you at ease, this is not a crime movie. This is not a mystery. This is a classic tragedy. And that's how we'll shoot it. And that's what the screenwriter will be instructed to do, is to just preserve it. And I was like, okay, fine, okay. And then he goes and he tells me he's got the screenwriter. He doesn't, because we agree on the screenwriter. I said, I'll only do it if we get Brian out of it. He says, okay, no problem, I got Brian. He doesn't. Brian's prepping to shoot his own movie in Italy. He's 3 months out. And Clint says, I need you to adapt this mammoth 401-page novel in like 3 weeks. And Brian's like, Clint, I can't do it. And Clint says, okay. Like 2 hours later, there's a ring on the doorbell. Brian opens his door, and Clint's there. On his doorstep. And he takes him, he sits him outside with him. He says, Brian says, I can't do this. You understand? I can't do this. I'm in prep. And Clint says, I know. But if you were to do it. Sean Penn, exact same story. Sean Penn was insulted by Warner's initial offer. He says, I'm not going to do this. They insulted him. They were going to take him. They have a better chance working with Jimmy Cagney, who's dead. And Clint would call him every night and be like, Sean, I know you're not going to do this, but help me out so when I do get the guy who's going to play the part. If you did do it, how would you play this? Finally, he wore Penn down. And we all had that story. So Clint was a joy to work. I mean, just a joy. It was great. A great experience. It ruined me for Hollywood.
Sure.
You
weren't tempted to do your own adaptation, to do the screenplay yourself?
No, it was this great moment. He asked me. He said, "Do you want to do the script?" And I just followed my instinct, and I said, "No." And he said, "That was quick." So okay, I trust you. And it was because I just spent 2.5 years of my life. This was really quick after the book was finished. I spent 2.5 years of my life getting that book to 401 pages, not 410, not 399, 401 on the nose. And I couldn't figure out what to throw out. I wouldn't know how to trim that thing. I had no clue. I couldn't see the plot.
Sure.
It was all just sort of a, you mean this works?
Yeah.
That was my reaction. People were like, wow, this is really good. Really? Wow, cool. So, and the way I remember looking at it was I looked at the 40 pages, which I think, I can say this because I hate almost everything I've written. I think the first 40 pages is the finest writing I've ever done. And that's the 1975 section. And I said, how would I cut this? I wouldn't want to leave out anything. So I'd have a 40-minute opening to a movie. And Brian changed it into 6 pages, and he encapsulated it in an image. Everything that I put in those 40 pages was in the image of the boys writing their names in cement. And when the car pulls up, Dave hasn't finished. And so his name stays unfinished in the cement for the rest of the movie. It's the last shot of the film. Because everything ended for him on that day. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea. And only somebody who thinks like a screenwriter.
Right.
I was thinking like a novelist.
Yeah.
I would have 40 pages of people talking about lost innocence.
Yeah.
You know?
And you did insist that the thing was kept in, but you later regretted it.
Yeah. Clinton and I became obsessed with this idea. It was such a graduate school idea. Sean's wife calls him in the book and never speaks. And it's just, the theme of the book, as I was writing the book, was silence kills. And I grew up in a place where, like I said, nobody wanted to talk about bad things. And it does so much damage. And so Dave is killed by silence at the end of the day. And the wife, the killer, turns out to be silent. And I decided, oh, you've got 2 big silent metaphors in here. Go for 3. Kill the lily. So the wife was constantly calling Sean and not talking. And Clint and I missed it from the screenplay. And Ryan said, it won't work. And both Clint and I said, yes, it will. And I wrote it back in. And Clint directed it. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's bad. It's the only real bad thing in the movie. It's in the music. That's it.
Good experiences. I mean, you know, Gone Baby Gone, Ben Affleck, and Scorsese, Shutter Island. These are
not bad.
Yeah. Which came first? Gone Baby Gone first.
Gone Baby Gone was purchased first. It wasn't made until second.
Yeah.
And then, and that came out. And Gone Baby Gone was not a critical. I mean, it was not a financial success at all. It was a critical success, but nobody saw it. It was out of movie theaters in 2 weeks. And then they couldn't release it in the United States, in the UK, because the little girl on Timor site held a can.
That's right.
And so it was not a success at all, financially. But everybody knew they'd done something good, and Ben Affleck would just shout up to the stratosphere as a director. Then TNT got a little known rule from the FCC that they had to show something besides Shawshank Redemption, at least once a week. And that's how Baby Gone got discovered in the States. It got shown on TNT on a constant loop. And so that's 2 great movies, or very good movies made by books. Then comes the news that Martin Scorsese and DiCaprio wanted to shut it down. And I get word, and I go out to dinner with my wife, and she says, who have you told? And I said, nobody. And she said, what do you mean? I've told people in Italy. And she said, what do you mean you haven't told anybody? And I said, I feel, what am I supposed to do here? I'm supposed to tell my friends, some of whom can't get books published, some of them get them published but can't get movie rights. Some of them, I'm supposed to tell them, oh, and now Martin Scorsese is going to direct my next one. They'll hate me, they just hate me. And she said, honey, they are going to find out. And I said, well, we'll see. So about 4 days later, I get an email, and the subject line is from George Falcons. It just says Scorsese. And I open up the email, and all it says is, fuck you.
And then The Wire. And then you began.
The Wire was kind of in the middle of all this. The Wire.
So that was your first foray into writing for
Yeah, I was terrible.
Yeah.
It was really terrible. David had a teacher.
Okay.
David and Ed really took me to school on The Wire. So season 3, I don't believe they invited me back for season 4. They did. And then by season 5, I never was with them.
Right. And this is now a huge thing. It's
But it
one
wasn't
of the
big.
it's one of the big things you do.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, this
absolutely.
is, because a few years ago you described the whole explosion of after The Sopranos and The Wire, and the whole explosion of long form, serious
Yeah.
long form television. You compared it to, New York theater in the 50s with Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller, and this is a golden age of television.
It is. It's better than any time in the history of television.
Yeah.
Premium cable figured out they only needed a small margin of viewers to make, because they're subscription based. So if they get 2 million, which would never survive in network TV, they're good, they're fine. That was Breaking Bad's average, 2 million. And they can get 10 million, like Sopranos, but 2 million's fine. Once you shoot for that target, then you can do quality.
Sure.
You don't have to worry that it's not playing in priority. It's kind of like screw priority.
Yeah.
You're good. So The Wire, I mean, man, nobody watched The Wire when it was on.
Sure.
The Wire didn't go to The Wire until the 5th season. When we were losing 100,000 viewers a year, and we didn't start with many. So
It's still extraordinary that because they nearly were going to cancel it after season 2. I think.
there was some talk. Every season seemed to be, and then season 4 they told us, if you guys don't get the greatest reviews of all time, you're done.
Sure.
And we got lucky. We got the reviews. It was our best season, so that was our finest hour. No question. So then we came out. When we were doing The Wire, we had, I would say to people, I work on an HBO show. They'd say, I love HBO. What's the show? I'd say, The Wire. They'd go, no. For some reason people would say this thing. This was the weird thing they'd say. They'd go, is it a documentary? No. Well, I only watch on Sunday nights. It's on Sunday nights. So we were so stunned by the end of season 5 that it became The Wire in caps. And it was mostly because of you guys. It blew up across Europe.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, the show ends. And we were like the Harvard MBA class. It was weird. We were just getting flown out to Hollywood.
Yeah.
People, I remember sitting in rooms with major presidents of companies.
Yeah.
They just had meetings. There was no plan. And I was sitting there and they'd be like, so how you doing? Good. That's good. That was it.
Yeah.
It was weird. And it happened to all of us. Eric Holdenmeyer, me, George. I mean, obviously David and Ed, and Richard Rice, all of us. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And that I haven't stopped working in TV since.
Sure.
Except for Boardwalk was not on the air, but I haven't stopped.
And that is a major. I mean, how do you manage that in terms? Here's a novel,
Yeah, kind of write a novel and then take a break.
Yeah. But you're in LA now. You're what some people might call. What some people might call a player.
Yes, I'm a player.
Yeah.
It's surreal. Yes, I'm in LA. Which I don't know what the equivalent would be. Be like if you're from Dublin and you move to LA. It's so weird. It's just so weird. And I left Boston and away from kids, just really took to it. And I was outnumbered out again, so I'm screwed. And I can't say I don't get work. I get a lot of work.
It's a terrible fate.
It's awful.
We feel your pain. You should write a novel about it. A screenwriter and novelist who's pondering the
yes, because that has not been written yet.
Yeah.
No, I have said, to describe it to people who say, oh yeah, it's a really tough life. And it is a tough life, there's no question. But it is kind of like living in the Matrix. You know something's wrong. You can't put your finger on it, but you know. And I say, I live in the land of perfectly toned people with tuck faces, tuck lips, because they've all had plastic surgery, who walk around with purse dogs asking to talk to the manager.
Paradise.
Yes.
Yeah.
If that's paradise, then yes. So it's and everybody's like really annoyed most days. They're all sitting there, they're drinking their coffee, and there's a million coffee shops in my neighborhood, and they're all sitting there, and they're drinking their $9 coffees. Just look upset. They look really upset in their really nice workout clothes. And I just go, I fit here so well. This is like second nature.
You know, on the streets.
Yes,
Yeah. So, you know, I will open it to the floor for a couple of questions, but
That'd be great.
I will ask the question which will be the first question, which is tell us about love-hate in Hawaii.
Okay, in Hawaii, isn't that crazy? Yeah. Love Hate, which most of you know, is wonderful TV show set in Dublin, and I was approached to see if I could Americanize it. I was in Hawaii at the time. I watched part of Hawaii. We spent a lot of time there. It was a couple times a year. I was in Hawaii when I saw it. I watched all the tapes, the DVDs, and I said, "This is a great show, but this is an anthropological show. This is a show that exists on this idea that nobody knows this Ireland. That's the appeal. You guys know this Ireland, and the appeal to the rest of the world is we didn't know that. We thought you were all sitting around in cable sweaters by a hearth, drinking Guinness and singing Danny Boy. That's what we think of Ireland. And this is Train Spotting meets Goodfellas, banging it out in like, you know, the estates. So I said, well, you can't do this in America because we've done this. This is The Wire. What are you gonna do, send in Detroit? Everybody knows Detroit is a big problem. There's no way to do this. And then I was driving, like, I think the next day, I was just about to turn the left, and I went past this part of Oahu called West Oahu, the Waianae Coast, which is really poor, very angry. It's not the Hawaii you think of. It's a culture of former Polynesian warriors that has been completely displaced, and they're all living on $25,000 a year, and they're not saying thank you for making us the 50th state. They're saying we want our country back, and the poverty's crazy, the drug addiction is crazy, and it's a surf culture. And I went, that's love hate. That's it. It's right there. It works perfectly. And I tried it. I transported there all the characters, and it works. It was nuts. All of a sudden, it was like, I can do this. I went, I pitched it, and everybody went crazy. Everybody looked at me first like I was insane. And then they went, wow, that works. That totally works. And so that's how we're gonna do it.
Okay. And you're not greenlit, you're nearly there, where are you?
We are at Death or Glory stage right now. We're either gonna be greenlit the next two months for a pilot, or they're gonna say, it was nice to know you, but we don't want to spend $10 million on this.
You're at that New Yorker cartoon, the guy comes back to tell his friends from the phone, and he says, my agent says it's down to 2. Me and the guy they're going to give it to. You know?
That's great. I feel like Wesley in The Princess Bride when he's on the Dread Pirate Promise Road. Most likely kill you. Good job, Wesley. Most likely kill you in the morning. But good job. You know, he says that. That's how it feels. It's like, am I going to get killed in the morning, or am I going to become the Dread Pirate Promise?
Does anyone have a question for Dennis?
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that your old neighborhood has changed, ethnically changed and things.
Yeah.
And I was in Dorchester about a month ago, and I was staying in an area that I thought was going to be Irish American, but it's African American and Vietnamese.
Yeah, that's part of my neighborhood.
Beyond the ethnic mix, how has Dorchester changed since you were writing about it in the
Well, but that beyond the ethnic mix is like saying, outside of that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? I mean, it's a big one. The ethnic, you know, we were so hardcore Irish or Polish that everything was, you know, Dorchester Ave at one point had more Irish bars than any place outside of Dublin. It just was, that was your community. Now it's not at all. And I think that's great. A lot of people don't. I think it's awesome. I think it's the melting pot. It's changed completely. There's almost nobody left in my neighborhood that still lives there. A few who do. Yeah, I don't even know. So everybody left. So there's nothing really left of that neighborhood. I write about it, kind of frozen in time in whatever square. And it's the one that I grew up because it's my home. But I don't write about it anymore, except for battery books. So does that make kind of sense?
Yeah. And where did everybody move to in Boston? Did
They went all over the place. The South Shore becomes Dorchester South. So Braintree, Quincy, Hingham, that becomes Dorchester South. And that's where everybody gets out when they're successful. So and then or if they want to stay in Dorchester, they move to South Dorchester. They move to Neponset and Ashmont. That stayed strongly Irish. That's where all Irish are from. You know, those. But I was, how my neighborhood went. Just couldn't change it really.
So the aspirational thing was to move south.
Yeah, the aspirational thing is, it's the Thomas Jefferson line. We are soldiers so our children can become doctors. That kind of thing.
Another question. Paul.
Okay, all right. First of all, huge fan, needs to say.
Oh, thank you.
And I actually agree with you from the point of view of I was trying to be a novelist, but I accidentally realized I was a screenwriter.
Oh, great.
I didn't want to be a screenwriter,
Yeah.
and I tried to be one. But also, just from the point of view of the stuff you wrote in Boston, particularly Patrick Kenzie novels, maybe you tried to write something based in Boston and they really very badly. The question was, is that, and because you have a bad voice, that you can just answer with a nod.
That's okay. Somehow, I think I'm gonna have no voice tomorrow, but I'm holding it out here.
Please bring back Patrick Kenzie for one more.
Okay, then. I will try. I will try if he speaks to me again.
And exactly. And one last thing is there any thought of making the film out of Moonlight Mile?
There's been a lot of talk about making it into a TV show.
Oh, right.
It came very close, actually. It came to the point of they were setting up production offices, and then it collapsed. Hollywood's nuts, man. It's nuts. I got on a plane to Germany last year at this time. I was a showrunner. I had looked at office space. I got on the plane, I was a showrunner. I landed in Cologne, and I was nothing but a writer again. He was dead. And I was only kind of helping that show.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get him on his feet. It was not my passion project. Love Hate has been my passion project for 2 years now. My agent said to me, I have 3 projects. And so I can't say which are which. But my agent said, if Love Hate doesn't go forward, you also have this and this, Project A and Project C. And I said, look, Love Hate is my one true love. Project A is my trophy wife. And she's really hot, but she's not my love. And she said, what about Project C? And I said, that's the girl I visit when I'm drunk and a little it's Love Hate is, I'll say this to you guys right here. If Love Hate doesn't go forward, it's the first time I say this about any Hollywood project, it'll break my heart. Yeah. I steeped myself in that. I put everything I had into it. I can tell you more about Love Hate than probably anybody with Store Carol. I mean, I get down backwards and forwards, every character, everything, every through line, including the places we diverge. I know where that thing's going for 5 years. And if they take it away from me, I'll be very sad.
Lady here.
Yeah, I'm also a huge fan. But I wanted to just say to you, in Mystic River, the Dave character that Tim Robbins plays, who's, obviously such a damaged character, but I also thought it was very sad. I mean, I thought it was very true to the fact that because he was a victim himself, he actually was an extremely unpopular person amongst his own group and peers, whereas, you sort of wanted him to, recover and be looked after, but he never really did, and it's very sad to think that.
Well,
it's a very true reflection of what often happens to people is that they, because of their own,
we thin the herd.
Yeah.
We thin the herd. It's a natural instinct. We just, and particularly back then.
Yeah.
My mother said to me, I'll never forget this. I had to break her heart because she did look shocked, but it was like, sorry, that was the world you made for us. My mother said when everything started blowing up with grease scandals, and several of them were people I knew, and she said, why didn't any of you tell us? And I said, because you wouldn't believe us.
Yeah.
And I could see she was hurt, but she didn't argue.
She knew it was
You guys were under the thumb of the church. You believed the pomp and the circumstances and the finery, and the cardinals walking in with robes. You never questioned that.
Yeah.
You know, that this might not be the church Jesus intended. And a lot of kids got damaged because of it.
Yeah.
So,
Because my own mum, who's 90 and flying and everything, but she was saying something similar at the time that, you know, we knew, you know, she said that our eternal shame is that we knew behind doors, you know, like obviously in Ireland there's a lot of industrial schools, a lot of things going on.
right.
And she said, you know, there was always rumors and talk, but no one ever confronted it because the church told, you know, our priest told us that it wasn't true, you know, whatever rumors were quashed, whatever.
Right.
And that was she said, and that is our eternal shame, you know, that we never confronted it, even as we grew older, the people around us were victims and we never really sort of explored it because she said we couldn't, you know, didn't know how to.
Right.
But my question, I suppose, is that because of that character, you know, he's one of your only real sort of victims that never, you know, there's a lot more people in your, you know, become more heroic,
Yeah.
are saved much more
Yeah.
as the books go on, whereas, you know, you just, you know, decided with him that it was always going to be bad to do that. Like in that book, you know, because of the story.
He was the hero to me.
Yeah.
Nobody else. But he's not there to anybody else. Jimmy's the far more compelling character. Everybody wants to follow the gangster. But Dave was to be the hero because he's struggling against something that statistically he would be very prone to. The real horror of this is, you know, if you're molested as a child, you're exponentially more likely to become a child molester. And Dave has that in him. And he fights it. At every step of the way, he fights it. He doesn't give in. He never gives in, right up until the moment he dies. But the problem with people seeing that is Jimmy's more compelling. And it's more fun to follow the guy who gets things done. And here's a very telling moment for some of you who are aspiring writers, or figure yourself out. I had a really interesting moment with Mr. River. I had 3 men, and they were all fighting for primacy in the book when I was first writing it. And I wrote 100 pages. And at that point, Sean was going to be the hero. Sean was the hero. Jimmy was probably the most minor of the 3. And I showed the book to my editor, my agent, and my wife at the time. And all they wanted to talk about was Jimmy. And I realized that's because they all wanted to have sex with Jimmy. And that made me realize that if women want to have sex with your main character, he's your main character. So they have to. And then I just put all the focus on Jimmy, and it made the book work. Because Sean was me, and Sean's boring. I'm boring. And Sean was just a kind of me working out what is essentially survivor's guilt, which is what Mr. River's about a lot. I felt survivor's guilt about the fact that my friends mostly came from broken homes, and I came from 1940s Ireland. I came from this very secure, locked-in house that I went home to every day, and I was safe. And people say, you know, why did you make it and nobody else did? That, very simple, is that. There's no other reason. I won the parental lottery. It's as simple as that. And I didn't do anything for it. You know, just got born. Thanks. So, yeah, that's what Mr. Go really did.
It's the power of the gangster as well. Of course, then by that, more gone by, but they just can do what they like.
Yeah.
And that's so attractive, you know.
It's awesome.
I don't have sex with Joe, but, you know, I want to beat Joe.
Yeah, you want to be Joe. You know, Joe's got his cool moments.
You can do what
There's a moment in Live by Night where they confront the Ku Klux Klan. And, you know, I mean, who roots for the Ku Klux Klan? and
back in the day.
and a guy goes, and the guy says to Joe, you're out of your element here. You're done. And Joe says, really? And he nods, and Dion walks over and shoots the guy in the head.
Yeah.
And I remember writing that moment and just going, that's why you're a gangster.
That's right. Is the movie interested in that? In Live by Night?
It was supposed to film, it's been pushed out 3 times.
Wow, okay.
Ben Affleck is directing, he's cast himself.
Wow.
Ben Affleck, Zoe Saldana, Sienna Miller, and Elle Fanning. But Ben keeps taking acting jobs. The last time he did it, I made a joke. I said, you know, Ben, by the time you shoot this, you're gonna play the father.
Yeah.
You know. So but right now it's, you know, maybe 6 months from now. I think it was the last time.
Okay, so good. Another question?
Yeah.
Okay, and we might make this the last.
Yeah,
because we've done-
I just wanted to ask you about the music. You made a point that you didn't like the music in one of the movies. I thought the soundtrack to Shutter Island was mesmerizing. And I'm just wondering how you feel about music in general, what should it do for you, and how do you think it might fit into, what's your vision for Love Hate?
Oh, Love Hate, forget about it. I got soundtracks built up. I already know the song that's gonna play at the end of the pilot. I got everything built up. I'm ready to rock that thing. I love music. So, look, I was on record, and I'm record as saying the greatest person I've ever worked with in Hollywood was Clint Eastwood, hands down. But me and John Penn took a big run at him on the music. I mean, we just wanted to be the first Clint Eastwood movie that had contemporary music in it. We sent him CDs. I don't know if you ever even looked at it. We poured it on, and he said, "No, thanks. I'm gonna put jazz in those scenes." Nobody in the history of Dorchester, Massachusetts, has ever danced drunkenly on a bar to a piano reg, as they do in Mr. River. But you know, what are you gonna do? So no, when I write, the first thing I do is I make mixes, and I make them throughout the book because they teach me what the book's about, and then I start to realize what I'm writing about. The Love Hate, the first thing that ever came to me was that there's a song by 9 Inch Nails called All the Love in the World. And the chorus is, why do you get all the love in the world? It's the song of a guy, you know, and that came to me, was my first idea for credit sequence, was going to be people eating at restaurants and bars and going to shishi resorts in Hawaii, and you see all the people waiting on them, but you can't see their face. Your face is just smudges, and because you never see them. And then the last thing we would have seen in the credit sequence to this song, All Love in the World, is they deliver the check. And it's that idea that sooner or later, the check is gonna come due. And that to me caught the same spirit of Love Hate in Dublin. You know, keep these people down all you want, sooner or later they are bursting out at the seams, and this stuff is gonna happen on Grafton Street, you know what I mean? Which was our theory about The Wire too. So, that's just one way that music cues stay in my head all the time. I mean, I have hundreds of songs ready to go on. It's also the tradition of Love Hate. All those great moments with the lads, you know, and there'll be these moments in Love Hate where they open sometimes with them, where you'll just see them drinking like lunatics and doing lines and then dancing in discos, and then the show will start, you know, because that's the part of the life they love. And it's always done to techno music. It's really cool. So that'll be the same thing. We'll be doing that. Thank you all very much. This was great. I'm so glad my voice hung in there.
Thanks, Anna.
Guys, just to say on behalf of the Centre, thank you so much to both Dennis and Becky for a fantastic interview. And don't forget, books upstairs are at the back of the room. So if you want to get your copy signed, I'm sure Dennis will be around for another few minutes. All right, thank you.
That was great, man. Thank you.